Now, I thought we were all meant to be equal before the law, but there's a new manual that's been issued to judges on how to handle cases involving racial or religious sensitivities. This manual was commissioned by the New South Wales Judicial Watchdog and endorsed by the Australasian Institute of Judicial Administration, and it explores the idea of therapeutic jurisprudence, which is the goal of reforming the law so that it apparently has a positive impact on the wellbeing of defendants. But what about the alleged victims' wellbeing? Not to mention the fact that this new manual reads more like a guide to being woke than necessarily upholding basic legal principles. Joining me now for his take, Director of Law and Policy at the Institute of Public Affairs, John Story. John, part of this calls for judges to be, quote, trauma-informed when dealing with Indigenous defendants and consider the, quote-unquote, pervasive intergenerational effects of settler colonialism. Now, obviously a judge takes into account a number of different things in every individual case they deal with, but what the hell should supposed intergenerational trauma and settler colonialism have to do with a criminal case being run in 2024?
Oh, absolutely, Caleb. It's crazy. It's nothing short of different laws for different races. The first thing you learn at law school is that the law should be blind. But what these practice guidelines require judges to look at is the racial ancestry of a defendant and whether their ancestors experienced, dispossession and trauma. And this is precisely the sort of thing that some of us were warning about during the Voice referendum debate, that it would create a two-tiered system in which different laws would apply depending on your ancestry. Now, Australians overwhelmingly rejected that proposal, but we're getting it through the back door via this judicial activism.
Does that mean, though, I don't know, let's say you're Irish, can you argue that you should have dispensation because you went through racism and your family suffered in the Troubles? If you're Indian, can you argue that you deserve special dispensation because the British rocked up and took over the joint? Like, how far does this stuff go?
Well, it's crazy. They only ever talk about one sort of trauma, and that's Indigenous trauma. And if you read the document, it's really filled with pseudoscientific claptrap. It talks about how trauma can be inherited through DNA and all this sort of thing. Look, and our justice system is riddled with this kind of thinking. The Love and Tom's case was a High Court decision which held that a New Zealand citizen with Aboriginal ancestry could not be deported from Australia despite being a convicted domestic abuser because Aboriginal people have a metaphysical connection to the land. It's absurd. Yeah, where is, as you said, an Irish person's, what sort of inherited trauma are they allowed to plead in the courts? It would be thrown out of court as ridiculous because it is ridiculous. People should be judged on their individual actions.
Well, another part of this manual that seems frankly concerning and ridiculous, there's a lengthy section encouraging judges working in specialist courts to consider aspects of the Islamic faith that offer, quote, clear moral and ethical guidelines when ruling on cases that involve Muslim defendants. So are they now suggesting as well that it's not only race that comes into this if you're Aboriginal, for instance, that now, I don't know, do we rule on the basis of Sharia law if you're a Muslim?
I mean, we already see every weekend our society becoming more and more fractured with these endless protests, and now we're going to have laws that apply differently based on religion and ethnicity. Although if I was a member of the Muslim community, I would be deeply offended by the comments made in this document. It talks about how because of religious conviction, Muslims are compelled to react to world events. That's the wording they use, as if they have no agency over their own actions. I think it's quite offensive, but more importantly, it creates this two-tiered society. And this is a real challenge for governments. We need to start addressing this sort of fracturing of society. It's bad enough that we see it on our streets. We don't want it in our courts.
It's the bigotry of low expectations is what it is.